We're going back to the big story from Cork football. Obviously, they've announced their plans to try and just improve the state of the game in Cork. Tony Leen, the sports editor of the Irish Examiner, is on the line with us this morning. Tony, good morning to you. How you doing?
Hi, Ger. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. The main thing about this is that Cork football has realised that they have an issue, and they've tried to get some of their more storied former players and managers together and build a committee, build a proper brains trust, and just start from ground zero.
Well, exactly. I mean, really, Ger, at any point over the last kind of 4 or 5 years, you know, you could have said we need to do this, and I suppose like the obvious thing to say is it's overdue, but you know, they've got to start somewhere with this. And I probably think actually last summer, when you actually look back at it, I mean, they took a hiding from Kerry in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and you know, people were saying, oh, this can't get any worse. And I think Eamon Fitzmaurice actually said afterwards, I think people forgot on that night, actually Kerry actually played very well, but I think the real I think, you know, turning point was in the qualifier subsequently against Tyrone, like where there was just an absolute acceptance. They were pummeled by Tyrone. They looked like absolutely rudderless. Cork people in the crowd, you know, there was a resignation there that day that even I've never seen. You know, I mean, you know, we talk about this Cork-ness thing, and I know you were chatting about it earlier, and you know, that was a day for me where, you know, the Cork-ness, the whole thing was gone. It had reached really the nadir for me in terms of, okay, you know, we need to start again here, because this is really bad. You know, Cork football, you know, may not be a Kerry or a Dublin, but they've still won, you know, they're still number 4 in terms of, you know, All Ireland's won after Galway. So this is not what Cork is about, like, and we actually must actually do something. And in getting the likes of Conor Coonahan and Graham Canty and Brian Cuthbert, I mean, you know, you're talking about serious people delivering good proposals. So there will be, Jerry, you know, because especially with the view there is of Cork football within the county at the moment, there will be a bit of eyes thrown to heaven and kind of, you know, oh yeah, whatever about this. But I mean, I would actually say, hold on a second, you know, give this a chance. Let's see what this is. It's over 5 years. There's deliverables in year 1. There's deliverables in year 2. I mean, let's actually see, do they turn a corner, and what turning that corner actually means. You know, I mean, Tracy Kennedy was speaking yesterday about making Cork competitive again, and I think that's important. Like, it's not about like they're going to win a senior All-Ireland. Let's actually start maybe with minor All-Irelands, you know, or under 20 All-Irelands, or getting to semi-finals in those grades, and then build it up to Super 8s and semi-finals and seniors. So this isn't a quick fix by any means. It isn't a quick fix. Obviously, you know, the name of the plan is for a reason. It's Cork 2024, but they do have to start somewhere. And I think, in fairness, people should actually give them the room and the time and the space to actually make progress bit by bit.
No, I think you're right, Tony, and like you mentioned our discussion about Corkness earlier on, kind of quite tongue-in-cheek about it, but there is a serious point there that when Cork have swagger, you realise how important it is to the whole county. Look at the hurlers a couple of years ago when they won the Munster title. Everybody around the country, I think, was happy to see the sea of red swarming onto the pitch when they won the Munster title on that particular occasion. It is something, when you use the term success breeds success, it is never as true as it is in Cork. Yeah,
like Corkness is a thing, you know. I mean, look, I've been surrounded by it on the sports desk, like, you know, the good side of it, like, for 20 years. I mean, if I can create a picture for you, there's a great dynamic in our sports desk. You have 2 Kerry men and a Tipperary fella on one side of the sports desk, and you have a raft of Cork people on the other side of the sports desk. And it's great back and forth. And you see, you know, as Tracy Kennedy alluded yesterday to, that confidence that just keeps on the right side of arrogance most of the time. Now, obviously, and unfortunately, you know, you delve into social media and Twitter, and you actually see it flip over the other side of the fence, you know, into a different kind of an attitude. But I think, broadly speaking, there is that self-awareness, you know, there is that self-confidence. And, you know, Brian Cuthbert, actually, in fairness to him, articulated it really well yesterday when he said, like, you know, if we don't have that, we're the same as everybody else, and we do not want to be the same as everybody else. And I think it was Tracy Kennedy, in the introduction to the report, made that point and brought that subject up. She basically felt, you know, we've stopped caring about football, and we've lost our Corkness. And, you know, in the first instance, we need to get that back. Obviously, there's several layers of technical detail, you know, that are being worked on. But purely from a human, emotional point of view, I mean, that's a very Cork thing, and they need to have it, I think, to be successful.
You mentioned the Cork CCC, which is your term in the Examiner this morning, Coonahan, Canty and Cuthbert. My initial thing is seeing them in those photo opportunities yesterday and thinking to myself, what is their actual role in this? Because they're three of potentially the best minds they have in Cork football. Yeah. Is there going to be a role for the three of them in this programme?
Yes, there is. I'm sure probably you did, Eoin, see Eamon Fitzmaurice's interview there in our paper a couple of weeks ago, where he was actually making that point about he thinks one of the biggest mistakes Cork football has made in the last number of years was getting rid of Brian Cuthbert in 2015. I mean, it was only yesterday, and I mean, this is important, I think, in the context of where Cork football is at and where it can be at. I was only looking back yesterday at statistics, like in 2015, which is only 3 seasons ago, Cork won 3 of their National League games in Division 1. They were extremely unlucky through a mathematical equation on the final day to be relegated. You know, Eoin, as well as I do, that they should have won the Munster final in Killarney that day. I mean, it was another series of fluky circumstances stopped them. So, Cork football was at a point there, where it was winning half its games in Division 1 under Brian Cuthbert. Now, I'm not saying everything is down to the fact that Brian Cuthbert left, but Cork football has had a habit of shooting itself in the foot many times over the last number of years. It's a point I've heard Colm Cooper make several times. Why can't they actually put a result on top of a result? So there is actually scope there. They're not, and this was something Conor Coonahan pointed out yesterday when he was talking about, minors getting beaten by Kerry by a point last year and Kerry going on to win the All-Ireland. It's not that Cork are a million miles away, but the key has been, and not to put too fine a point in it, getting their shit together. And this basically, I think, this document and the involvement of these people, serious people, as you said, like Canty and Coonahan, All-Ireland winners 8-9 years ago, this document is a realisation of that. This document actually says, enough is enough. We need to start from the bottom up again. And this time, we need to put the foundations and the structures in place, because there's an acceptance, and the lads were even making the point yesterday, because of the size of Cork, because of the supposed pick and the numbers that they have, once in a while, they're always going to almost stumble on a group of talented players, and knit them together. And, you've seen that manifest itself in minor teams in recent years, where Kerry have been streets ahead of everybody else in the country, and yet have only beaten Cork by a point twice in the last 4 years. So they have occasionally had that ability to knit a team together, but it hasn't come from anything that's actually structured and, very much set in place. And I think that's what Tracy Kennedy was saying yesterday. We need to actually formalise this structure. We need to make sure that this is something that carries us not just to 2024, but it's a process that carries us well beyond it.
One of the things that you mentioned at the start of this conversation, Tony, was how maybe people within Cork aren't fully aligned, that the county seems a little bit split between its hurling pockets and its football pockets. And we see the same a little bit in reverse in Dublin. You kind of still haven't quite seen the Dublin hurling inter-county setup match what the football team can do. And maybe they'll close the gap, and maybe we'll see what the work that Matty Kenny does that continues on what Pat Gilroy is doing. But just to tease that out a little bit, is there still a very defined split between hurling and football within Cork?
Yeah, it's a great point, Chair. I mean, there was, I forget who actually made the point yesterday, but it was a very pertinent point. You are not going to change 130 years of tradition over the next 5 years in Cork. And the person who said that was making the point that, in their heart and in their heads, large swathes of Cork will always be hurling first. Listen, I know it better than most. I'm involved in a club, in a dual club in Cork, and you, as a football person, you constantly feel you are just, that the wind is always just against you a small bit. Now, there are areas of the county, and obviously I'm talking about West Cork, where that flips completely, where, you know, down around Rosscarbery and Castlehaven and Skibbereen, it's very much like football 80, you know, hurling 20. There are parts of the county where it's 50-50, but certainly, Ger, you know, in the most populous areas, which are the city, which are East Cork, you know, I mean, which are even Mid Cork, like the Carrigal Lines and these places, you know, you still have that mentality. And unfortunately for football, what has happened, and what I would call the embarrassments that the footballers have suffered over the last number of years, you know, has probably only driven, you know, a greater portion of the GA supporting public to the hurlers, because, you know, whatever happens with the hurlers, you always feel that you're going to get your value for money, whereas people have actually just stopped going to watch the Cork footballers. And I think it was Tracy Kennedy, and I'm paraphrasing her here, but I think her basic point seems to be what has happened with the Cork football supporting public is, well, we're going to opt out emotionally, because at least if we opt out emotionally and we don't go, then we can't get hurt by what we see. So, I mean, you know, we can laugh and joke and, you know, about Corkness and all that kind of stuff, like, but that side of it is very real. You know, there's nobody in sport wants to support a team where, you know, they're actually squeamish about going and actually cringing watching what they are watching. And that's why I mentioned that Tyrone game to you last summer. I just felt, you know, you had a situation where it had really just bottomed out. And I know an awful lot of those Cork players, and there's an awful lot of those Cork players are really, really good players. And there's another crop of young players coming through. So the situation isn't hopeless. But as I said, it just needed somebody, or this particular group, to pull the threads together. And if you actually get something going again, and that's what they're trying to do, that the Cork public will buy into, they will buy into it. And, you know, it's not then a question of, are you a hurling person or are you a football person? The debate then reverts to what Brian Cuthbert was saying, and that is, are you a Cork GA person? And we'll support our teams if they are giving us what we expect of them.
Yeah, like the hurling football divide is fascinating, and I do think from reading the report yesterday, that there might be some attempt at tackling this. I'm not sure what your take on this is, Tony, but one of the plans aims to have football taught in all primary schools in Cork as part of the PE curriculum, with all primary schools offering Gaelic football as an after-school activity. What are the hurling schools going to think of that? Well,
that was actually the very question, Eoin, I asked myself yesterday, because, again, I suppose I'm almost guilty then of the mentality that we're criticising, even by asking that question yesterday, because even though everyone is looking for a united front and a togetherness, I know, as well as everybody else knows, that hurling people, and I'm talking about dyed-in-the-wool 100% hurling people, who might say to you that I'll puncture a football if it comes inside the gates of my club, straight away their attitude of this is going to be, hold on a second, all this stuff, all these appointments, everything, this primary school specific teaching of Gaelic football, what about hurling? Hurling is the first love of everybody in the county. Tracy Kennedy very much tried, she attempted certainly to nail that on the head yesterday, as did the other people. Everybody was saying, this is a Cork thing, this is not a football thing, this is not a hurling thing. It just happens to be that at this moment in time, football is in far greater need of help, assistance and a solid foundation than hurling is. And that is true. That is undeniable, even from hurling people. Inter-county hurling is in a far better place in Cork at the moment than inter-county football is. That shouldn't be the case. You look at somewhere like Galway, where they have it pretty even. You mentioned Dublin. You are always going to have, I think you are always going to have that tilt one way or the other. I would say what they're looking for, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but at the moment, you know, you were talking, it's 75-25 hurling football in Cork. If they can get it back to 60-40, I think that's the kind of thing where you're talking about, that's what they're actually looking at. But even leaving hurling out of the debate, I think everybody at this moment has just got blinkers on, and they were saying football is in dire trouble in Cork at the moment. It's not that it's a hopeless situation. It is salvageable, but the way things are going, you know, it's not going to get any better on its own. We have to actually fix it. I mean, Graham Canty is a really deadpan kind of a guy, but he's a very, very thoughtful, serious guy. I mean, you can see how he captained an All-Ireland winning team. And I said to him yesterday, I mean, so where do you think Cork are at the moment? And, you know, deadpan Canty just basically said, well, you know, we're mid-table in Division 2, which puts us about 12th in the country. We are outside the top 10. I think that's about right. It's a long time, lads, since Cork was outside the top 10 counties in football in this country.
Tony, one last point. I've been just reading a little bit about the response to the Blue Wave when the Dubs published it, and John Costello had to come out and basically attack everybody, attack being the best form of defence, because there was so much about how cocky they were, talking about winning one All-Ireland every 3 years, and how that was ridiculous, it was never going to happen, even from a bit from within the county. There will be naysayers, but actually Gaelic football desperately needs Cork to be competitive at the top tier for the next decade, because otherwise we're going to be getting used to watching Dublin and maybe one other team competing year in, year out, and that gets boring real quick, as we already know.
Yeah, you see, and the man beside you there in the studio, Ger, will attest to this. You see, Kerry take Cork football more seriously than any other county, and I mean, I know people take the piss out of that kind of a statement, but it's actually true, because we're living beside it. And when you hear someone like an Eamon Fitzmaurice saying, you know, Cork is the first game that we absolutely get up for every year, you must remember that comes against the backdrop of Fitzmaurice going to college in UCC, and so Paul Gainey going to college in UCC, and David Moran working on the South Mall in Cork. And these Kerry people understand the Cork psyche, and they understand that at any given moment in time, you know, they can produce a performance and they can take down a serious big outfit on any given day. Now, they seem to have lost that capacity to do that in the last couple of years, but it has always been there in the past. Like, so, I mean, in terms of you saying, Ger, about them getting back and everybody needing them, there's no doubt that everybody actually needs them, because they keep sides honest. That's the best way I'd put about Cork. You know, 3-4 years ago, I mean, Dublin playing Cork, Dublin wouldn't be taking that for granted. Kerry wouldn't be taking that for granted. Donegal, Mayo wouldn't. At the moment, Cork football are in a position where you basically almost take them for granted. And that's not a good place for Cork to be in, and it's really not a good place for any opposition to be in, and it's definitely not a good place for Gaelic football to be in. I
have one last one for you, sorry. You guys have basically effectively uncovered the whole funding situation with regards to Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and without the Examiner we probably wouldn't know anything about the difference in the figures that Croke Park are telling us from what the Cork County Board have been telling us recently. It's a bad time to be looking for investment, because ultimately this will work if they get investment. We saw that money in equals output in Dublin GAA over a sustained period of time, as long as there's good organisational skill, and I've no doubt that Tracy Kennedy and the people who were there yesterday are exactly the right type of people to organise this. So will there actually be money to send the coaches in to coach Gaelic football in all of the primary schools? Yeah, it's the very point I made myself in the piece in today's paper, in terms of, I think the window of opportunity, Ger, in terms of the public's buy-in for this is quite slim, and I think that's the reason, is because they've just lost patience and they've lost trust in the administrative side of Cork GAA. They've also lost trust, by the way, in their Cork footballers. So, you know, it's a particularly, you know, thin sheet of ice that they're on here, and I do think they need to get it really right from the start. I said that, and I do believe so also going, you know, speaking to your point there, that the very first appointment out of the gate is going to be the high performance director, which is somebody who's going to basically oversee all the S&C on all the inter-county teams in Cork. It's a hugely important appointment, and if they don't get that up and running, if they don't get that advertised, if they don't get that salaried and appointed in the first couple of months, I guarantee you, and I guarantee Tracy Kennedy, people are just going to switch off in Cork to this, and it's going to say, typical Cork GA bullshit, typical Cork football, you know, can't get their ducks in a row, forget about it, I'm not getting involved in that. No, I'm not investing any emotion in that. So we were very pointed yesterday in asking the questions, who funds those appointments? Who actually writes the checks? And Tracy Kennedy was very specific in saying, these checks will be written by Cork County Board. This is not a Croke Park thing. This is not a national GA thing. The stadium issue is one issue. She made a commitment, Ger, at convention
I'm not certain it was the wisest commitment, but she made a commitment at convention that the stadium debt would not affect the day-to-day running of Cork GA. Well, this is the first litmus test of that. These appointments, they're talking about 5 appointments. My understanding is at least 3 and possibly 4 of them are going to be salaried appointments. So, like, you're still going to be talking, whatever way you slice and dice the figures, you're still going to be talking about 200-300 grand of salaried appointments. Let's get the first one, the high performance one. Let's see how they manage with that one. The county board meeting is the 29th to ratify this report. Once that report is ratified, they then said they're going out in February, they're advertising the position. It doesn't have to be a Cork person, they said. They'll get the very best person for the job. And if they get that up and running, they get that person in place, then all of a sudden you've started something. You know, you've actually started getting people involved. People on the ground are saying, oh yeah, this thing is up and running, and maybe then you get some buy-in. But if you don't get that right in the first instance, believe me, the Cork public will switch off.
Tony, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
Cheers, Ger. Bye.
That's Tony Leen, the sports editor of the Irish Examiner.